Friends, welcome to the Get Ready webinar for Heaven and Nature Sing 300 Years of Joy to the World. I'm so excited that you have joined me today to just get a little more familiar with the materials that you have downloaded for this series. In the Worship Design Studio, we began doing fully scripted series a few years ago. Those of you who are Worship Design Studio subscribers, that means that you have access to 12 years worth of worship series ideas for every season of the year. But about 4 or 5 years ago, I began to create these fully scripted series. And this is really to help you jumpstart your experience of sensory-rich worship. That's what I teach in the Worship Design Studio, and that is worship that brings the message alive with all of the senses, with all of everything we have at our disposal to bring the message alive, not so that we can have slick worship or have lots of bells and whistles necessarily, but because people learn and communicate in different ways. And so for some people, it will be the words and perhaps the sermon that means a lot to them. But there are some people for whom the visuals and the way that you bring the story alive with the metaphors and symbols that you're going to use for this series, that's what will express the deeper message of joy and abundance in their lives. And for some, it will be the music. And when the music is carefully chosen and really brings that message alive, when there's coordination between the words said, the songs sung, the sounds, the visuals, the drama, when all of that works together, then we are more likely to bring that message in a way that's what I call good, meaningful and memorable. And we want it to be meaningful because we want the faith narrative to be so alive that it lives in us beyond the time and place of worship, and that's memorable, right? So that we take that out with us into the world and we begin to live out that narrative rather than just visit it on a Sunday morning. So meaningful and memorable, that is what we're about in the Worship Design Studio. We have people on who are subscribers, so they have access to the educational materials, to all of our series all year long. And we have people who have just purchased this one series a la carte, and it may be your first time to become familiar with some of the things that I do and that I teach and that I think is important. So I'm glad you're on this webinar to learn a little bit more. I'm going to be going through the materials and to tell you a little bit more about what you've downloaded. We have some people on who are still deciding what they want to do for Advent. And so this will give you a little bit better idea about whether this series would be right for your church. Okay, friends, so the slides, what I wanted to start with is just some of the theological themes for Advent. This is something that I go over in my Worship Design Studio planning retreat that we had in August. And just to remind us of what the core messages of the season are. You know, Adventus means literally the coming of Christ. There's this anticipation, the incarnation, the indwelling of the holy, the meeting of the human and divine. This is that story of how God bursts into our world, becomes human so that God might dwell among us, Emmanuel, God with us. The entrance of light where there is no light. That's why we have this beautiful tradition of lighting more candles every week so that we can really embody visually and viscerally with what we do, the bringing of more light into the world. The gestation, anticipation, this whole pregnant, what are the possibilities that the world is pregnant with at this time, in our time and place? What is yearning to be birthed? What is gestating within us that we can bring into the world? And with this series, Joy to the World, the Heaven and Nature Sing, what we'll be looking at is how joy is ever present, not just in the happy times, but also in the times that are not so comfortable or don't seem so good. But how do we give that message? How do we birth that message into the world in this time when the world needs to hear that message so very deeply? Yearning for the presence of God. That's one of the things that Advent helps us to do, is to see how much we need God in our lives. We need the holy infused into our lives. And we can focus on that just a little bit more. It's a narrative of hope that God is ahead of us, that God's future is being born and was born into the world, is being born, and we are a part of that story. And the expectation of justice and peace. This is not just a sweet little story about a baby being born, a pregnancy. I mean, already the pregnancy is rife with the complexity of Mary, unmarried, young woman in her time. It's already as complex as all of our lives are. And so it's a story where the voices of Mary, as you remember with the Magnificat, come through, and the voices of all of those prophets who say that the world is meant to be God's and to contain within it the reign of God, the peace, the hope, the justice, the joy. There's a beautiful song that's one of my favorites, Justice and Joy, for everyone born. And that is one of the songs that I've included in one of the weeks in this series. And it really gets to the heart of what we are yearning for. God will delight, right? Joy. God will have joy when there is justice, right? Justice and joy. So I have just the icons of some of our other fully scripted series. So those of you who haven't decided yet, if you want to do joy, this one that refers to joy to the world, you might think about some of the other ones, or just know that we have these available for future years. Angels Among Us, Calm and Bright, God Bless Us Everyone, and Sacred. And if you go to worshipdesignstudio.com/series, you can see all of our fully scripted series that you can buy a la carte if you're not a subscribing member. And of course, all of our subscribing members to the Worship Design Studio have access to all of these all the time. All right, so I'm just getting us into the mood. Now you notice that I've gotten my office into the mood here. Christmas in October, as I'm doing this, pulled out the Christmas things. But this is one of the things that's kind of odd about what we do as worship designers and planners, and that is that we must begin to think about the season well ahead of the season. And so sometimes I like to just surround myself with the sights and sounds of the season so that I can get myself in the mood, put myself in that place as I'm beginning to plan. So if you get together with your team and watch this recording, or look through the scripts, look through the materials, pull out some of the Christmas stuff, even though it's not out of the closet yet. Pull it out so that you can kind of set the mood and the tone. All right, so friends, this Advent Christmas, the theme was inspired, of course, by the fact that the hymn Joy to the World is turning 300 this year. And so I called it Heaven and Nature Sing, 300 Years of Joy to the World. And as I was developing the concept, I knew I wanted to do it around the Joy to the World hymn. But as I was developing the concept, I began to, as I usually do, because I'm a visual learner, I go to Pinterest and I type in Christmas joy, and I see what pops up. And there are things that begin to inspire me besides the hymn itself, besides the scriptures, because I did want to use, if I could, the Revised Common Lectionary Year A scriptures for this year. So I look at all of that together. And when I came upon this Joy with the wreath in the middle, I just loved that image. I think that'll be really doable for all of you to create. And I looked at that wreath and the idea, the beginning of the idea about the snippet of the hymn that says, "And heaven and nature sing," really came to the forefront. As what it is the whole cosmos is bursting forth with God's joy. And that really refers to the psalm that Isaac Watts used as he penned the words to this hymn. It's really his interpretation of the psalm. And so I dug into the psalm, and really the psalm is one of those wonderful psalms among many that says that all of nature cries out God's praises. And so that's what we're going to focus on as what we call an anchor image in this series. And that's one of the first things, when I can get an anchor image, that is a key metaphor that will help me to design the whole series and give me some very concrete ideas about how to do things visually, how to bring in elements that will make the series unique. And it was this combination of all of heaven and nature singing. And so you're going to see throughout that the nature will pop up, and has, if you've read the scripts, you know that I've incorporated nature in a big way, and the wreath in particular. So let's get started here. What you're seeing on the screen now is part of the document that is the Scriptures and Synopses document. And this is really the very beginning of it, is the essence of the message. So, joy to the world, the Lord is come, Isaac Watts. Now, in the synopsis there, I call him the composer. He, of course, is not the music composer, that's Haydn, but he is the composer of the words of the song. So if that word, you can change that word out for author or lyricist or hymn writer or whatever you want to call it. But Isaac Watts did pen the words. And so there's a bit of that Psalm 98. Now, I found this beautiful translation by Nan Merrill of the Psalm 98, and that is what I have used. So if you're looking for the translation, say at BibleGateway.com that I have used for Psalm 98, you won't find it because I pulled it out of her book. But it's beautiful language. Make a joyful noise to the beloved, to God, to all the earth. Break forth into grateful song and sing praises. Yes, sing songs of praise, extolling love's way. Right? Lift up your hearts with gratitude and joy. And I think this language really gets at some of the heart language that we want to bring out in the Advent Christmas season. And then I was very heavily influenced by reading. What I did is I usually look for some books, some inspirational books to steep myself in as I'm beginning to conceive of the series. And one of those was the book called The Book of Joy, that has quotes in it. It's about the dialogue between the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. Yes, as we discover more joy, we can face suffering in a way that ennobles rather than embitters. We have hardship without becoming hard. We have heartbreak without being broken. So it is Archbishop Desmond Tutu who says this, and whose quotes are in the book. And so what I loved about this, and this is at the very, very heart of this series, and that is, we have hardship without becoming hard. That there is just like the trees, just like nature has a network of roots underneath that feeds it, even though we can't see it, there is a network of sustaining joy, divine joy, that helps to sustain us even in the hard times. These two people are... These two people have seen lots of hardship, the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And they don't come from the same faith tradition, but they do have that in common, that they believe that there is a deeper joy that we tap into, and that this is what makes life worth living. And so I think that one of the dangers in doing a series on joy is that we will just gloss over and we'll say, it's what we're supposed to be is happy. Right? Our faith is supposed to make us happy. Don't worry, be happy. Now, there is some wisdom to that, but the deeper wisdom is that life is hard, and we don't have to wait for things to be all right for us to find and tap into the deep joy, even if it's not evident above the surface right now. It is there. All right. And so we'll discover, as the synopsis says, the depths of joy can be found especially in the midst of suffering, the work of justice, and the presence of compassion, all part of the coming of Jesus to this world, and a message the world so desperately needs. So I hope that you will tap into that deeper joy, that idea of the deeper joy, and know that the message is one that will speak to those who are feeling happy and those who are not feeling happy. So on that note, here's the list of the services within the series, and what we suggest is that elusive joy, which is our blue Christmas service, is something that you do rather than waiting for the longest night. Sometimes we do a blue Christmas service in the longest night. But instead of waiting and that's December, 21st? Instead of waiting all that time, I suggest you do this Blue Christmas service within the first week of the series. Maybe even just preceding it, or that night of Advent 1. And I say this because of what I just said about joy and about a series about joy. Folks who have lost folks in the last year may wonder, oh, how am I going to live through a series on joy? That's going to be difficult for me because I just had, I'm in grief, right? And so I've written the service to address that and to help folks to enter into the whole series, having acknowledged the pain, having acknowledged that we're not just talking about a happy, clappy Advent Christmas, but we will be digging deeper. And so I want you to consider not calling it a longest night service, but calling it a Blue Christmas service, and having that early in the season for this series. The Advent one is called Prepare Him Room, Hopeful Joy. And so you can notice that I have used the Hope, Love, Joy, Peace, four Advent pieces that are traditional, and coupled that with joy. And instead of saying joyful joy, I used unabashed joy. So that's on the third week. But the first part of before the colon, I have used snippets from the verses from the song Joy to the World. And that has been some of the inspiration for some of the liturgy and will be for your sermonizing as well. So Prepare Him Room, Hopeful Joy is the first Sunday. Repeat the Sounding Joy, Loving Joy is the second Sunday. Now, I know a lot of you often have cantatas on the second Sunday. And so the actual synopsis talks about the effect of music on us, on lifting our spirits, the effect of being in community and making music. And so that is kind of designed to help you dovetail the theme into the cantata. Now we have, amazingly, Hope Publishing came out with a brand new cantata this year that has to do with joy. And what's amazing to me is in their promotional materials, they haven't even mentioned that it's the 300th anniversary of Joy to the World. I'm not sure anybody at Hope Publishing realizes the genius of what they just did. But there is, you could do a cantata around joy. You may have already chosen a cantata, but what you could do is, there's usually narration in a cantata, and you could tweak that a little bit. Preachers, work with your music directors and tweak the language in the narration to kind of go a little bit more with the series. That's absolutely okay. Now, I had somebody already write in with a question about the fact that they're going to do their cantata on the third Sunday in Advent instead of the second. And so you could just switch 2 and 3 around. I don't make series so that they really are like a sequel where you have to have been at the first in order to understand the second, in order to understand the third. I mean, we have people who can't come consistently every week, and so we wouldn't want to do that to people. So a series doesn't work like a sequel or like a soap opera, right? So I do believe you could interchange those, and you just have to do a little bit of tweaking to make that happen. So if your cantata is on a different week, you might think about using week 2 script to go with the cantata, because it has so much to do with the joy of music and how that can affect our state of being and our well-being. So Make the Blessings Known is unabashed joy, or that Sunday where we talk about joy. And The Lord is Come, Make the Nations Prove is the fourth one, peaceful joy. And The Lord is Come, incarnate joy, right? Joy has come to roost in the very human person, human and divine of Jesus the Christ. And so The Lord is Come, what a perfect part of the hymn to offer for Christmas Eve, right? How can you not? Wonders of His Love then is the Sunday after Christmas. And when I design an Advent Christmas series, I always do design that full thing so that the Sunday after Christmas is also part of that. That is the culminating, the end one. And so we don't want to consider it kind of a low Sunday, which we sometimes call it. Certainly it is in aftermath, but really, the 12 days of Christmas, it used to be that Christmas, the actual Christmas season, was Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and all through Epiphany, right? And so the real Christmas time, when you would sing the Christmas carols and you would, all these things would happen in that time. And we've kind of put the cart before the horse in our culture. So I want to encourage you to use that Sunday after Christmas script to sort of culminate, to say, what does it all mean? It's really kind of the looking back at it and saying, what does it mean for our lives, right? And so it really means compassionate joy, that because we know that life is hard, and we've talked about the fact the world needs that deep, abiding joy that God gives, how can we become that through our compassion in the world? All right, so moving on, and as we go along, just go ahead and put questions in the chat box, and we're gonna stop later on and get through that and look at your questions. All right, so the scripts. This is the beginning of your downloads. Number 1 is Scriptures and Synopses document, and I really want you to take the time. I know people are anxious to get in and see what the actual Sundays look like, but it really will do you well, and you will understand the very scripts themselves much better if you will read through the Scriptures and Synopses. So you get a theological grounding, scriptural grounding. You can see, what are the scriptures that I'm using? How does this flow happen? What is the whole scope of the series? Read that first, if you would, to get a real deep sense of what's going on spiritually and theologically and biblically, and before you move on. The other thing I want you to look at first is the number 2 in your downloads, and that is the overview of worship. So what this is just a little overarching review of the scripts, of the order of worship. And I just do a little bit of telling you why I made the decisions that I made. You can take a look at that and see how close that is to your existing order of worship, and see if there's going to be some changes that you might want to think about. Oh, is that a change that we can handle, or do we need to, move the pieces around a little bit, which is absolutely okay. I want you to look deep into my eyes, and I want you to believe me when I say it is absolutely okay to adapt anything that I have right there in the scripts, because the point is we want your folks to hear the message. And if what I have given you is just one change too many, or a lot changes too many in your order of worship or the way that you do things, and you think that people will be distracted by the changes rather than sink deeply into the material itself, then make those tweaks. I also want to encourage you, if you've never used my series before, and know that people who have taken the risk to do something a little bit different than they normally do, because it's rich and because the message is imbued into everything, and because I have written leader parts that help people understand why we're doing the things we're doing in the way that we're doing them, that they have found great success and people really excited about doing something a little bit different because it made it special. So you have to weigh that. I create these, and usually around 1,500 churches are using these. And so I can't know how to customize it just for your church. So I put it out there in a format that I think is close to many traditional orders of worship, but it's your job then to tweak it and to decide and weigh how it is you really want to do it. So please know that an adaptation is what we expect that you will do. Looking at the overview will really help you get a sense of the flow and order of worship, and help you begin to see the scripts when you start to get in the weeds, because there's a lot of details in those scripts. So reading the overview first will help you. Reading the overview of the scripts will help you to understand the flow once you start looking at the scripts. All right, now, the scripts come for every one of those services that I listed before in both PDF and Word versions. The PDF version is there so that you can always have a record of the original, right? So if you start tweaking the Word script and you delete something and you want a real quick look at what it was, and see what you need to put back in, you have the PDF always. We also make it really beautiful. We like to do that because you may want to do a read through, and to have that visual, that backdrop. Often my bulletins, or what I call worship guides, will look like what I have there in those backgrounds. I'll use watermarks in the background. And so I do that because I want the theme to come across in every which way. So as you're reviewing the scripts, if you're looking at the PDFs and you have, these things, these nature backgrounds behind there, it might get you in the mood a little bit more. So that's why we do it. But we give you two versions, the PDF and the Word version doesn't have that watermark. It has just the plain ones, and that's what we expect that you will adapt. So speaking of which, this is an example of adapting the scripts. So here I have page 8 of the first of Advent 1. And so on the left, you can see the original script that I'm sending you. Now, the original script will have things, notes from me to you, like, let's see. It says piano solo excerpt C downloads as introduction to prayer. So, you don't want to keep all of that stuff. C downloads, this is where it's at, this is what you might do. And you see in the sung response, we have, I always give you a sort of a classic traditional hymn choice as well as a more contemporary choice so that you have some ideas. And of course, you may be changing that completely, but you don't want to keep that in all of your scripts. So you are going to strip down your scripts, adapt and strip them down for your use. And that's what you can use the Word document for. So on the right, you can see I've chosen Come Thou Long Expected Jesus. I'm assuming here I'm United Methodist, so I just kept the Methodist number in rather than the whole list of every hymnal that Come Thou Long Expected Jesus is in. You see how I'm stripping it down, and then I'm personalizing it, right? So Prayers of the People, instead of saying the pianist plays Joy to the World piano solo excerpt, I have Bob plays the Joy to the World piano solo excerpt as introduction to the prayer, right? So I just made up my pianist name, Bob. And as the music closes, Reverend Jeannie comes forward to the mouth of the center of aisle holding. So I'm making these decisions based on my space and my personnel. So you want to do this, right? So that the scripts become your own. Now, another thing I want you to notice is that in the Prayers of the People, I have written out very scripted sentences of especially things that the worship leader, pastor can say as introduction to, say, hymns or the threshold moment at the beginning, the call to worship, Prayers of the People, that kind of thing. But here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to just read it off the page, right? Because I want you to be able to make it your own. Now, you might read it off the page. You might read the words that I wrote because you think that really works for your congregation. But I want you, if it's a pastor or a worship leader, I want you to become so familiar with those words that you can speak it to the people, right? So I really want you to spend time with those narrations. Tweak them, put them in your own voice. And then on the right, you'll see that one of the things I did here was I just took out the main points and I put them down. So let's say I'm the pastor, I'm Pastor Jeannie, and I've stripped it down to just the main points, and so that I can make those points, but I can make them in my own words. All right, so this is something you're going to do in preparation. We've given you a huge jump start with having all the words and all these things prepared. But this is something that you can do to really make it your own, is that spend time with the words that I have written for leaders and then make them your own. And either just have notes there so you can be more extemporaneous, or just become so familiar with the words that you can speak them to people rather than read them off the page. All right, so that's an example of adapting and stripping down, personalizing. Now, here's an example. I had a question from someone yesterday about scripts. And there's, when you have a big block of something that the pastor is going to be reading or, saying, sometimes for musicians to have their music there and to have all these words and things is a little bit too much. And so what you might do is even strip it down further for musicians and highlight their parts, right? So it's not so many things. Now, if you have specific words that you are saying and the music is underscoring underneath them, and that happens in what I call the threshold moment or the call to worship. You'll see that the threshold moment in your scripts at the very beginning, and you'll see that we say that we want the piano to continue underneath, or the organ or the guitar or whatever it is you're playing, to continue underneath as that little snippet of the psalm is read. And so I wouldn't take those words out, obviously, right? So that is helpful, especially in a shorter thing where there's music underneath, and those are the exact words that are going to be spoken. Then the musician can see, oh, we're getting close to the end of that. I need to get back in my music to where we can start singing again, right? So don't go crazy with taking out stuff, but I just wanted to highlight this, that you could go even further and personalize the script so that it's easier for musicians. I also want to suggest musicians that instead of having scripts to one side, and because this might be the first time you use a script rather than just a bulletin, right? And there's a lot of great reasons to use scripts. But instead of having a script off to the side and your music over here and you're switching music books and things, you might consider copying the music so that you have it all in the same notebook. And you can have, say, your script on one side, a facing page to where you have the hymn on the other side, so that you have it right there in the notebook, and it's just an easy page turn. In the worship design studio, I teach a lot about flow and transitions, and this is one of the things that can really help with this. And the reason why I have the rubrics in red and the scripts that say, the piano begins to play underneath the introduction, that kind of thing, is because we're trying to model this whole idea of flow and transitions. Those of you who have studied with me before know that my latest book is called Think Like a Filmmaker, and we talk about the role of music is not just in these slots with hymns and songs and preludes and anthems, but can also be the thing that helps the service feel like a spiritual journey from beginning to end. And so these scripts are a way to help you get used to using music in that way. All right, so I'm going to bring Mark Burroughs on. Mark Burroughs is my children's expert, and once again, he has just done an amazing job of bringing some scripts to us for children's time. So go ahead, Mark, and tell us a little bit about your inspiration about this, and just describe a little bit. They all have that in front of them, but what would be some of your top tips for the children's scripts that you've written?
Sure. So, hi, everybody. I'm hanging out here in Fort Worth, Texas, and I'm so glad to be on with you. Well, joy is such an interesting concept because especially with kids, we can confuse joy with happiness. And I think we all kind of know in our gut that those are two different things, but it can be a little difficult to unpack that with kids. And so the best way I can describe it for children is that happiness is when your face is smiling, and joy is when your heart is smiling. And I think we all, as humans, just we know the difference between the two. And so trying to find a way to suss out how we can experience joy, even when the kind of temporary feelings of happiness can be fleeting. When I talk with parents and stuff, we talk about having our children grow up to be healthy and happy. And I'm like, healthy, yes, but happiness, I don't know. And they all kind of look at me with shock, like, what do you mean you don't want your children to be happy? And I'm like, I want them to be fulfilled. And when you live a life of fulfillment and meaning, you're going to have times, and all of us who are called to we're following a call. And when you follow that call, you're going to have days where you're just nailing it, and days when you just want to lie down on the floor and cry.
Yeah.
And but it's because you're doing something meaningful and with purpose. It's the thing that gets you up every day, gets you up in the morning ready to go. Sometimes at 2:30 in the morning. But it's beautiful work. It's meaningful work. It's joyful work, even when the temporary happiness is gone. So that was kind of my inspiration there. And so with joy, and Marcia, of course, you set it up so beautifully with the Heaven and Nature Sing, taking out that part from that great hymn. And so what I wanted to look at was a different way to approach joy, utilizing images from heaven and nature that are part of the Christmas narrative or the Advent narrative. And so one week we focus on stars, and one week we focus on snowflakes, and one week we focus on angels, and one week we focus on the animals that might have been there during that first Christmas story, and kind of use that as a point of departure. Even the holly, for that unabashed joy, that joy that can't be held down by the coldest winter night.
That's right.
Holly, and so with that, we've all had Laffy Taffy with those just horrible jokes on the inside of the wrapper. I would call them dad jokes, which only have to be funny to dads, which is, they're Velcros, and that's fine. So for that, I have little leaves of holly, and in the instructions to write a different joke. So it's Jolly Holly, a takeoff on Laffy Taffy, and you tell these cheesy jokes and to kind of elicit that unabashed joy.
Yeah.
Or one Sunday, it's the snowflakes and how each snowflake is different. And what they found is even when snowflakes look almost exactly alike on the outside, but at the molecular level, they're different. So that there really is that uniqueness and how, and that's for the peaceful joy, and that and kind of connecting that sense of the snowflakes are all unique and one of a kind, and how when we realize that we're in a world that no matter what, we are all made by God, we are known, and we are loved just the way we are. That kind of peaceful joy that comes from that.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Mark, one of the things I wanted to highlight for folks, if you've studied with me before, you know that I use this term threads. So we find things that are that we repeat from one to the next service, and that creates a continuity. It creates a recognizability. So we do that with music, with like a theme song and a benediction song. We do that with ways of doing prayers of the people, and you also do that within your children's time scripts, which I so appreciate. And so there are usually you have a prayer at the beginning, and it has hand motions. And I so appreciate some of the wisdom that you have given us in the Worship Design Studio as a guest expert over the years about, bringing some embodiment to it. And you do that so well. Mark, one of the things I want to ask you as people prepare, so those who are doing the children's time at their churches will be watching this, and we fully script it. And just the same thing as I said about leaders putting it in their own words, leaders, really studying it so much that they're not reading it, but they're bringing it alive. I would imagine would be super true in taking your children's scripts, reading through it, and making sure you have it in your body, so you're not just, the point is not to follow every word you write specifically, but you have given them such a specific example that they can learn to do these really embodied and lively times with children. So it's not just sit and soak for them, sit and tell a story. There's some very specific things. Would you just give us a snippet of your top tip around people taking your scripts and then getting ready to do it?
Sure. So, getting away from the script as soon as possible, I think, is really important. So, and that means internalizing it, which really means taking it and making it your own. Whenever I coach folks on how to work with children during a children's time, the biggest fear, I think, for so many people isn't sitting and talking with kids. It's sitting and talking with kids in front of a bunch of very critical adults. And so it's so important to just to be authentic, to be your truest self. One of the greatest gifts that you can give a young person is to be yourself, because that doesn't just make you come across as comfortable. It gives them permission to be themselves. And that's that is so important. And you're going to model that for people, as opposed to being, well, I'm in the big worship space now, so I must therefore henceforth use this very liturgical language and churchy words. And just talk with them. Just talk with them.
Yeah. Great. So we're looking, Mark, at the picture, of course, of you with the joystick. And when you sent this to me in an email, soon after I told you what we were starting to work with, I like that rolling on the floor laughing acronym, like totally true. Totally true. Oh my gosh. I just loved it because, you're such a wonderful trickster anyway. But this is so fabulous, and I can't wait. Seriously, friends, you got to take pictures and post them on the Heaven and Nature Sing Facebook group of your joysticks, because this is going to be so much fun.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, that's what I'd love to see, is see everybody do it. Originally I was going to try to, those big block letter things you see where people get in the middle of it and they make their body into the letter. And I was thinking about that, and I'm like, joyful. And then I'm like, wait a second, if only our bodies could make an O. And I'm like, wait a second, we've got a great O right there. Yeah.
so fun, and they're super easy to put together. So this is going to be our hashtag moment, right? Jenna, put in the chat box if we decided what hashtag we're using for this. I think maybe Joy Christmas could be a good one. Yeah, we've got to do hashtag with these joysticks because it's just going to be so great. A couple of years ago we had Angels Among Us, and we had people with big, huge angel wing murals on the walls and taking pictures of themselves and hashtagging "Do Not Be Afraid." But this is our or maybe it's just hashtag joy to the world, because that's exactly what we want to bring is more joy. And hopefully when people see these things of us, it'll make them laugh like it made me laugh. And we could all use a good laugh every once in a while. Amen?
Amen.
Yeah, that's great. Well, hang on just a little bit, Mark, because we're going to come back to you a little bit later because we're going to talk a little bit more about what's also available from you for Christmas Eve. So hang on just a moment. All right? Thank you. Okay. So that's Mark Burroughs, folks. I'm sorry you couldn't see his face, but at least you were looking at his big O mouth the whole time. So, Mark, are you still there? Speaking of extras, Lanyard. Oh, there he is. I'm so glad your camera worked because you always have great friends with you. Oh.
Thank you. I'm sorry it took so long to get on. It's a Christmas miracle.
Your camera is the Christmas miracle. So, Mark, you also have something a little extra to offer that people can get separately, and the link to that is in the children's documents, the children's time document. We have a link that you can get this separately, and it is a puppet play for Christmas Eve. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Right. So at our church, the 5 o'clock Christmas Eve service is the family service, and it's exactly like all the other services with the carols and the candlelight, except instead of a sermon, there's my buddy.
There.
Instead of a sermon, we have a puppet show that conveys the message, and it's always about 10 minutes or less. And it's fun, it's playful, but it's also, we try and have it be really tender. And so the one that we're offering this time is called Perfect, and it's about all the animals that you would imagine might have been there at the first Christmas, like the cow and the donkey and the sheep. And then, of course, there's the duck, who's not really part of the nativity scene at all. And so he thinks to compensate for that, what he should do is just to try and make Christmas perfect. If he can just make it perfect, the perfect tree, the perfect decorations, the perfect everything, then everything will work out and he'll be accepted and loved. And do any of us who work at a church feel like that ever? If we could just make things perfect for everyone else, then we'll finally capture that joy. And so that's the message of that. It's about 10 minutes long. And it's also recorded as well. We always record our puppet shows on Christmas Eve because sometimes even in Texas we have iffy weather. We don't have snow, but we have ice. Or one of our puppeteers has laryngitis. And so we always record them well in advance so that we can have the puppets sync up with what we're doing. And we practice it a few times. And then we've had kids be the puppeteers, adults be the puppeteers, who if we've had a puppeteer that get caught in the ice and we're doing the service anyway, we just grab someone from out of the congregation and say, okay, here's your lines, go. So it doesn't take a lot of prep work. Like Christmas Eve, it's like you've got a lot going on. So there's another option too. If you don't feel like it's something you can do on Christmas Eve, then the Sunday before Christmas Eve is another Sunday I would recommend it, because that's often, especially when Christmas Eve is so close to a Sunday morning, some people, they kind of save up their church bandwidth and they don't come in on that fourth Sunday of Advent, but instead come on Christmas Eve, especially like if Christmas Eve is on a Sunday. It's not
I know that, right?
Yeah.
Thank goodness that's not this year.
Thank goodness. But this is a good draw. So if the kids and families know, hey, you're going to do the Christmas play and a couple of, or the Sunday before Christmas Eve, that might get some more of those families. You might even do it like in addition to the children's message,
yep.
or as the children's message. And it's a lot of fun, but we try to make it real sweet, especially on Christmas Eve. I have some crazy puppets that we use for other times of year. But for Christmas Eve, something a little gentler, but also fun and funny.
Yeah. Great. So if you that's sold separately, but the link to get it to buy it is in the Children's Time documents, and what you get is the scripts and some instructions about doing it, but also that recording you're talking about. So you don't have to record it yourself. You've got a recording, and you can just get some puppeteers. So that's a really super simple way to do something very special. Awesome. Thank you so much, Mark. And I've had some people ask the question if this is the same one that you offered last year, but it's a different one.
It's a different one, yeah. Last year was the Christmas Mouse.
Yes.
So this year, we do a different one at our church every year. We have for 14 years, and we have wonderful voice people who go into the studio, and we record it, and we practice, and it's a different one every year.
That's great. So we have a question about where you find the puppets, and I think we have a link in the document itself. When you get it, there's a link to what you recommend, but just say a little bit about that.
Sure. I mean, first of all, just go online and look and see what's available. Folkman is a company that does these. In fact, the ones you see right now, I think those are all Folkman puppets, if I'm not mistaken. They're very lifelike. I mean, including kind of small eyes, and so they don't quite have that Muppety big face appeal. So just go online and check. And the other thing I would suggest is when you find a puppet you really like, get a few of that version of it, because companies will discontinue puppets, and we've run across that before with the cow. But luckily, we got another cow before it was discontinued. So,
holy cow!
Holy cow! Exactly, very holy cow. Yeah.
So about how much are those that we're looking at right now?
Okay, so the cow is probably around 30, and the donkey's probably around 30. The little lambs are a little less. The bigger sheep are probably more. And of course, you can always go on Amazon, eBay. Sometimes they've got them used.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you might have somebody in your congregation who loves to make puppets, who would find a pattern and make a puppet. Yeah, that would be very cool.
And here's what I found too. People care a lot less about the stage craft of how the puppets look. They care more about the storytelling.
Mm-hmm.
And so don't worry too about I've got to set up all this pipe and drape staging and make it all look. Don't worry about that. I mean, just if the puppeteer is completely visible the whole time, kids don't care. The only time they care about seeing the puppeteer is when you're trying not to be seen. So don't worry about that. Have fun with it.
Yeah.
Trust the imagination of your congregation.
That's so great. Thank you so much, Mark, for making that available to us.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. See you later. All right. So also in your downloads, and these numbers that I have listed here, when you download off of the Hightail site, our file sharing site, we want you to download the whole all of them at the same time, because here's what is helpful is that because we've numbered them, when it goes into a file in your computer, hopefully it gets ordered in that numbered way. Although I did just see somebody with an older PC this weekend, a pastor where I was consulting, and when she downloaded it, it went 1, 10, 11, it put all the ones first. So anyway, the best laid plans. But anyway, that's what the numbers are for. So number 11 is the communion prayer. And the reason why I put a separate communion prayer rather than writing it into whatever service is the first Sunday of the month, which many of my Worship Design Studio subscribers have this practice of first Sunday of the month, Communion Sunday. But that's not true of all my subscribers. I have many from Disciples of Christ tradition. I have some Episcopalian, Lutheran. So these are traditions that have communion every Sunday, MCC churches. So what I have done is, and some other mainline denominations, churches who've decided they want to do communion every week, even though their denominations don't require it. So what that means is that I create a communion prayer and then you insert it wherever it's needed, right? Wherever you would put that. And of course, you tweak it according to your denomination. This is part of the liturgy that I really want you. I use the sort of ecumenical standard, that the different parts of the prayer, the ecumenical standard. Something that's different between Presbyterians and, say, United Methodist. I'm teaching at a Presbyterian school, so of course this is very prevalent with my students who are Presbyterians here, is that the words of institution for them are not in the prayer, they're at the end of the prayer. So there are things that you'll want to do to tweak it for your denomination. But I give you enough fodder for you to begin to do that. And then if you're doing communion every Sunday, you could go in there and tweak some of the language so it would match more clearly what you have just preached about, right? So you could customize it for every week, so it's not the same one every week. But of course, that's up to you. One of the things that I like to do is I like to put our theme song music to some of the sung pieces of the prayer. And so that's what I've done in this one. The music that we're going to talk to Chuck Bell about in just a moment, you'll see that show up in some words that I have written for the Sanctus. So that's about the communion prayer. Again, adapting for your own needs. All right, so number 12 is a worship guide example. And I put this in here so you would see, how I strip down the scripts to just what the people need for their participation. Sometimes you might think that, you need to have more words because there's more words in the scripts, but I don't mean for that. In fact, I think that if you have people who would benefit from having the full scripts, say they don't hear so well and you don't have a great sound assistance program in your church, earphones or that kind of thing. It might help people to have the full script so they can see all the words. But otherwise, you want to do a worship guide or a bulletin that is much more pared down. And so I put an example of Advent 1 in there so you can see what I would consider what you would put in a bulletin and what you wouldn't put in a bulletin when you look at it side by side with the script. I also did it in a format. It's 4 pages that are 8.5 by 11. And I like to make an 11 by 17 folded format because it gives much more space on the page, and you can use that watermark photo behind it to give it some texture. It makes the worship guide feel like part of the visual setting. You could even take photographs of your visual setting, your wreath, your tree, or what have you, and then use that as a background so that everything has the same feel. So get creative with that. We have put the actual logo in your downloads, so you can put that on there and use that as well. So it's just an example to help you as you think about bulletins. Somebody messaged me and asked about bulletin covers, and we don't make bulletin covers because we have so many churches using this that have different formats of bulletins, worship guides, different sizes, that it would just kind of make us crazy to try to provide all of them or guess what everybody has. So we give you links to, we have made sort of photo albums in websites like unsplash.com, which are free, beautiful photo downloads. So we have collected photos that we would use when we were creating our own worship guide covers. And so get creative about that and create your own, right? Customize your own. Our computers these days have that technology. And so I would encourage you to create your own customized worship guides, covers. Now, be sure that you become part of the Facebook group for those who are using this series. Last year, people started making bulletin covers and then sharing them online with other churches. And people started resourcing each other. And so this is so much fun. I love this part of what it means to be part of a community that is focusing on some of the same material, because you can start to share ideas. And so we have that Facebook group for you to do that. So get really active in that as you're preparing, and scroll down and look at people's ideas and questions. They may have asked the same question that you have. I see the question from Jeff about where to find that photo album in Unsplash, and actually go to I'm going to talk about the visuals and media document in just a moment. And it's actually a link in that document that will take you right to our collections. All right. So you can't find it just by going to Unsplash, I don't think, unless Jenna has a different idea. All right. So moving right along, that's what we're talking about next, is the visual and media ideas. Oh my gosh. You are going to have so much fun with this because it is this focus on heaven and nature. And so think stars, the galaxies, and greenery. If you did Calm and Bright last year, you probably still have a lot of stars left, right? So pull out the stars again, but then add more and more greenery. So, in the document, we have lots of ideas. Here's one of the pages from that. And we have Pinterest pages. So I have had so much fun. And because as I said, I'm a visual learner, I go to Pinterest first as I'm designing, as I'm writing synopses, as I'm writing the scripts. And I surf just to get inspired. And so all I had to do, friends, was to surf Pinterest for Christmas weddings, Christmas church weddings. And oh my goodness, so much fun, so much great stuff. And a wedding is a one-time affair. You're going to have it up for 5 weeks. So go for it, my friends. And because greenery, hopefully you may have some folks who have in the back 40 have got some, pine trees or something. Hopefully it won't cost you too much to just get more and more and use more greenery than you normally do in your sanctuary. So take a look here. Here's one part of the Pinterest board. I just took some snapshots, some screenshots of our Pinterest board, but lots of different ways to add greenery to different things. Like you can see the rosemary around the candles. You can see things scrolled up and little sprigs. I mean, there's just so many fun ideas. You're visual arts folks. And if you don't have a visual arts team, if this is your first time to get some people together to help you create this series, just find your HGTV addicts like me, people who love to watch home and garden television, and get them to start looking at our Pinterest pages, and they will help you get tons of ideas. Here's another one, and you can see how people there's pictures of greenery and wreaths and different ways of putting on the ends of the pews or the backs of the chairs. Start to think about this kind of thing. You will find some really amazing ideas like trees in the sanctuary and that kind of thing. Now, that may be a little over the top or not feasible, but it may spark another idea that maybe in the corners of your sanctuaries you have these these leafless branches that you spray paint white and put lights on to make your space just a little different than it is normally on an Advent Christmas time, and emphasize the nature a little bit more. And so here's another screenshot. Just, you see the greenery kind of spilling over. There's some greenery spilling over in the font, the baptismal font, spilling over on ledges, spilling over on staircases. Think about how you might get this sense that nature is abundant and spilling over, that it's the metaphor for joy, right? It's the metaphor for the way that God desires for us to have love and peace and hope and joy in copious amounts, right? So that the visuals can help us get that. All right, so take home pages. You'll see in the visual and media arts document. And Jenna, I just want to thank you again for your work on all these series. Jenna is the one who takes my crazy ideas and then puts them together in these visual and media pages and pumps them up and really helps to fill it out. So I'm so grateful, Jenna, again, for your work on this. Take home pages describes how we're suggesting in the prayers of the people, you'll see in the scripts, that every week I use a different natural element, a greenery kind of element. The first week is the wreath, and then at one time there's the ivy. At one time there's cranberries. At one time there's the rosemary. All of these things have traditional connections to Advent and Christmas, and I'm using them as a metaphor to help us dig deeper into the theological, spiritual message during the prayers of the people. And so what you could do is you could create take-home pages. And actually, we've created them for you. It's described in the visual media documents, but we actually have them ready for you to just print out if you want to do that, or tweak as take-home pages. And you could give folks these. And the idea is that it inspires an activity every week. So some of you may have small groups during Advent, small study groups, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But some of you may not do that during Advent because the season is really busy for folks anyway, and you have smaller turnouts for small group. But you may have turnout for an activity, like a wreath making party, right? For the first week, since wreaths are the focus of that first service. And so you may decide to do that, or just, there's a how-to about making your own wreath. And so families could do that together, or individuals who love crafts, So there's different things every week. I think one of the weeks I talk about rosemary, and so we've put links to recipes for cooking with rosemary. A lovely tradition of using rosemary at Advent Christmas. So that's some of the activities and group community gathering things that we've decided for this series. Media-wise, one of the things that could be really cool, I already mentioned taking photos of the visuals in your space and then using that as backdrops for your worship guides, but also using that as backdrops for your projections, for your song slides, for your title slides on your projection media. This is something that I teach in the Worship Design Studio. If you're a subscriber, you can go in and watch a whole webinar that I teach about media arts that can help you do that. So another thing you could do is nature time-lapse videos. And you could have that running, say, during an anthem or during a prelude or during something where we see nature bursting forth, but it's time-lapse, so we can see a flower opening. We can see, something growing. And so that might be fun to do. Here's the cool thing as well, is that our phones, if you have one of these fancy iPhones like I do, our phones have on them the ability to do time-lapse. So you might even be able to make that a project. Maybe your youth want to take on making some time-lapse nature videos. Maybe what they do is they create a time-lapse video of creating the big evergreens in the sanctuary and put that together in a video, and you see it growing and growing and growing and growing. Use your imagination in terms of media. There's just a lot of things that we can do media-wise, and that's one of them, and that's in that document. All right, friends. So this is not going to be an hour webinar as many of my other webinars are, because there's so much to talk about, but hopefully we're going to hit every piece, and then you can farm out the pieces of this Get Ready webinar to the people who are working on those pieces. But let's go on to talk about the dramas that I have written for each one of the weeks. Oh my goodness. So when I saw Mark's, mouth, and the wreath became like this symbol, I thought, wouldn't it be fun if we had like a live nativity scene? The equivalent for a wreath is the live wreath. So I wrote these dramas for Hope, Love, Peace, Joy, and the Christ Candle. So we have a live nativity wreath kind of thing. And I wrote these fun little dramas for them every week. Now, I have them as part of the opening of the service. You may decide that this kind of feel is not something that works in your 8:15 traditional service, right? So you can extract that. You don't have to do that, right? You'll decide. But it might be the perfect thing for your more family-friendly service, or for your more contemporary service, or even for your blended or traditional service. Your congregation might be one that loves these kinds of dramas and lighthearted kinds of things. So that will be your choice. But I had a really fun time creating them, because each one of these characters has their own personality. And they're incensed that the white Christmas candle, they're wearing white. So 3 of them will wear purple, just like the candles. 1 will wear pink, the one who is unabashed joy, will wear pink. And then the Christ candle in the middle is wearing white and doesn't really say anything until Christmas Eve. But the other candles are just like, why, who is this person? Why are they not talking? So it's a fun little thing. Again, feel free to adapt as you want to, but get your dramatists together and start rehearsing that. Do a read through around a table, and then put them. One of the things that I did in the kind of workshop video we did, which was unrehearsed, so be kind. The rhythm of the thing is not that great because we hadn't rehearsed. It was our first read through. So it's going to get a lot smoother and a lot tighter than the video that you're going to watch of us trying it. But have a read through and know that people they don't have to memorize it. You can stand them on stairs like we did in the video, so that the wreath, you can see this, they're kind of standing in a circle, but it's at an angle so you can see all four of them, and put a couple of music stands on there with shared scripts, and people can read off of that. Of course, they want to rehearse it and read through it so it comes trippingly off the tongue, but they don't have to memorize it. So don't make it too big of a deal, too stressful of a thing. But it is really, really fun. So I have a document in there that's the drama notes, but I also have just separate scripts. I have put the dramas inside the Sunday scripts, but I have this separate document that you could just give to your dramatist that it's not connected to all of the scripts, so they can just rehearse their scripts. I can't wait. I hope you will video these dramas and send them to me, because I can't wait to see how people do this. In our Advent Christmas series called God Bless Us Everyone, that was based on the Scrooge story, I did the same thing. I had characters every week at the beginning of the service, and people had a ball putting these dramas together. So I wanted to bring that back around and offer the dramatists in our midst something fun to do for this. And those scripts are not only funny, but they then get serious, right? They get meaningful, and it's really those characters that introduce us to the essence of the message for the Sunday. So consider those, and I can't wait to see what you do with them. Okay, so music notes. Chuck Bell, I know you're waiting patiently there. Are you still with us? Hey, are you on? There you are. Yay, your video is working. Awesome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, great. Yay.
Oh, wait, I got a little friend in the background, too. Can you see that back there?
Oh, look, the little angel is with you. Nice. Okay, looks just like you, Chuck. So Chuck Bell is my music collaborator, and he offers many things that go with our series. One of them is he has composed a call and response song for what we call the threshold moment, the beginning of the service. And it's something that you'll repeat every week. The congregation's going to get it right away because it is a call and response, right? It's a back and forth, so they don't even need to have music in their hands, because your choir or worship leader, singer, is going to be singing a line, and then you just sing it back. And we have a video of that in this music notes document. I've had lots of people email me and say, is there a recording or a video of this so I can hear it? Well, it's in the music notes, friends. Read the document and then click on the links. That will give you lots of ways to hear it and see it. So you can see that in action there. And Chuck is so good at helping us to draw the community in right away. And this call and response. Tell us a little bit, Chuck, about what you were thinking about, because there's a lot going on while we're singing this. We have procession of some greenery. We have procession of the candles. Tell us a little bit about how a call and response will help us with that.
Well, my favorite thing that you taught me, there's a lot of things that you taught me that are my favorite things, but one of the things that I put in practice all the time is that if you have a processional, or if you have something that is so important that you want people to watch, you don't want them to have a book in front of their face.
Right.
They need to be out amongst the environment to be able to see everything. And to do a call and response is one of the easiest and one of the most ancient things we can do inside of a church that is still so contemporary in some churches.
Yeah.
So being able to speak that phrase back not only allows your congregation to learn that over the next couple of weeks, it also allows visitors that maybe are coming in for Advent 2 or Advent 3
they can jump onto that music as well pretty quickly because it's call and response.
Yes, that's great. That's awesome. So I think that that's really going to be an effective way to do this. And like I said, you sing part of that call and response, and then there's a little snippet of the psalm. And you have even written into the piano scores, you've written in what you would play underneath that. And that is so helpful for people who don't have as much experience of playing underneath speaking. And so you've given them a score to do that. Chuck is really great at helping accompanists who don't feel like they have improvisational skills learn how to provide some of that underscoring, or what you call a sound bed. And so because you have actually written some things into the music, it's so helpful for people who are just learning to do this.
Right, and those sound beds, that measure that I did specifically in the threshold moment is very repetitive. So once your musician learns those 4 bars, they can easily turn their attention to what's happening spoken-wise, so they know when to go on because their fingers are in the guitar or the organ or the piano, whatever other instrument is accompanying, almost becomes an automatic pilot.
Right.
In that moment of the threshold, I don't know if you can hear the piano playing, speak, but it's that feel of that. So when you get back into the back into that, it's easy to jump into it.
Yes, absolutely. So Chuck is giving you a lot of support to try something new if this is something that's new for you. So I really want you to try it. And let me underscore, try it. So pastors, worship leaders, musicians, I want you to don't wait until the week before. I want you to go into the sanctuary soon. And I want you to try this out and then practice it so that by the time you get to Advent 1, you feel really confident and familiar with it so that you can lead confidently. So this is one of the joys of starting early, right? To plan ahead and plan together. And that is, don't wait to practice some of these things together. I know you start practicing on your own way before, but some of these things where you're collaborating with each other, practice those early on so you get used to it, and you get used to have somebody listen to you. So, and pastors, get on the microphone so you can realize, Chuck, you get softer, and sometimes even the accompaniment goes up an octave or whatever. You know what you have to do when I start talking to help support it, but not, compete with it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that rehearsing is so important. And even though I've given you a pretty good head start of how to do this musically, that's only one part of the puzzle.
Right.
It is a layer amongst everything else.
Right.
So yeah, that rehearsing and practicing is going to be really important.
Yeah. So I want to, we give congregational song suggestions, as I said earlier, sorry, I'm trying to get back to my slides so I can get them going. There we go. And so as you look through the music document, you'll see that I talk about, why I choose certain songs. I want you to adapt them if you want to. We have different things we have suggestions for anthems, for handbell. We kind of dug in. I asked some of my favorite handbell people and organists, what arrangements of Joy to the World that they like best. And so we've kind of listed some of those things to help jumpstart you. You'll find many other things that you want to do. But one of the things that we have for the prayers of the people is a piano excerpt from Chuck's piano solo. Chuck, you write piano solos, and you have an entire suite actually for Advent. So you could actually get that entire suite to use as preludes or as offertories of Chuck's music. But he has so generously given us an excerpt from one of them to use that sort of gets us into the prayers of the people, pulls us out, it gets us into and out of the silence in the prayers of the people. And so that is included in your downloads, that little excerpt. Chuck, you want to tell us anything else about that excerpt at all, or about your piano solos?
Sure. So the excerpt that I did pull out from there, it varies from the original piece just in its ending. It's shorter than the full piano solo, and it ends in an unresolved manner because it's really important in transitions as musicians for us to not always end on a final note. If we do that in music, which is written sometimes, it sort of separates the moment from the overall arching moment that's happening. If we end something always with a, and with the prayers continuing, it just feels like that, we've ended too soon. So the end of this piano solo is going to give you a really good example of how to do something that pushes you into the next moment. So I hope that through this excerpt, with these last two measures that are in this Joy to the World, you'll also learn some skills of how to push something into the next moment or to keep the congregation into the current moment while that prayer continues. Right.
That's great. That's a really great lesson for us, Chuck. And I love that you've offered that to us as an example. It leads into the pastor talking about leading into the prayers of the people. And then there's silence for people to contemplate some specific questions that come out of the metaphor and of the nature, and also what you might have preached in the sermon. And again, tweak those, adapt those questions if other important questions come up in your sermon. But there'll be some time for people to just meditate on those questions. And then that piano solo will ease us back in out of the silence as well, and then back into the pastoral prayer. So it will be, whenever I work with Chuck, I don't think that he's just providing accompaniment for me. We're collaborating on creating the prayerful moment, right? And so this is a real way to see yourself, pastors and musicians, to see yourself as a team and in creating the whole of the experience. So there's that. And then for our benediction song, which is also a repeating thread, we have the song called We're Gonna Bring Joy to the World, which is a Marcia Charles song. And Marcia Charles is a pastor and a musician, a composer. She's been a longtime member of the Worship Design Studio. She's a dear friend of mine. And whenever I send out the synopses, you can bet that I'm telling you what, by midnight that night, she has sent me a song. It's amazing. She's just an amazing songwriter and gets right to the heart of the message. And this song is no different. And what we're inviting you to do, we're sending you the entire song, so it has verses and choruses. You could use that as your closing song for Advent 1, do the whole song. But then the refrain is what we're suggesting that you do as a benediction song each week. And it will be an earworm. Just right now, I'm just bringing it up. It's going in my head. And I will now be singing this the rest of the day. Right, Chuck? But what a great thing to be to have as an earworm. We're going to bring joy to the world, hope to the people. That's a great song. And what I love about these things that repeat is that, especially, he's got the sleigh bells. I know you were just waiting for a moment to bring out the sleigh bells. Yeah. What I love about these little refrains that get repeated every week is that usually it's kids who start to hum that at home, start to sing that. And I've just had such sweet little stories sent to me about kids who that becomes a soundtrack of their lives. And that's happening for adults too, but we don't always hum them out loud. So I'm just very excited about the musical pieces that will help us. Chuck, would you tell us just a little bit, and then I'm going to go back to Mark. Mark, so get ready. We'll see if your camera works again. Chuck, tell us a little bit. You always offer some extras at chuckbellmusic.com. So would you tell us a little bit about the extras that you have there for this series that might be helpful to folks?
Yes, and I'm going to put a link in the chat because they are already live on the website. So the music resources that I provide, in addition to what Marcia has already given you through the Worship Design Studio, is all of your accompaniment recordings. So if you have a church that does not have a pianist organist, a band that can play these tracks, play these songs. I've already done them for you in piano accompaniment. I've also done them in piano accompaniment with the melody being played by a celesta, which is like a little glockenspiel. And then I've recorded myself singing the lead line. So if you need to use it as just the congregation responding to the tracks, those are already ready for you. Advent 1, Advent 2, Advent 3, Advent 4, Christmas Eve, and the Sunday after Christmas are already available for you, as well as a full demo for the first Advent. So it's got me singing the melody lead line and the congregational response all in one track. So what's coming up also are full orchestrations for those. So you'll have, if you don't want to use a piano accompaniment and want to have something that's a little bit fuller, there'll be some accompaniment tracks that have violins and cellos and horn sections and something that's a little bit fuller. I'll also be providing a video of me playing this on guitar, the threshold moment and the reprise. So if you have a guitar-based worship team, they can listen to that and at least hear me do it on acoustic and see how it can fit into the moment itself. For those churches that are adamant about having written music, I will be providing just lead sheets for the melody if you really want to hand that out and want to have that. That'll also be available in the music downloads. So all of these resources will be available on my website with the link that I just put on the chat, www.chuckbellmusic.com. You can search for Heaven and Nature in the search box and it'll pull it up. Now these resources are going to be updated over the next month. So just know that you'll constantly get an update about once a week that'll have a whole bunch of more stuff that you can add to your music resources. And I'm offering all this for about, I think it's $12 that you're going to get all of these. It's over, I think it's going to be like 35 to 40 audio tracks, as well as just a whole host of other things. So I hope it's useful for you, and know that I'm doing that just so I can walk alongside this process with you in making your Advent season as seamless as possible through the music. Be the best communicators you can be. Yeah,
Chuck, that is just so incredible. You know, over the last few years of offering these resources, we have come to realize that there's a whole lot of very small churches that use our resources because, you know, these are pastors that have other jobs. You know, it's just been such a helpful thing for a lot of small churches. And some of those churches don't have accompanists. Some of those churches don't have choirs. And so Chuck has gotten so good. This is more resources than you've ever done before. And it's just amazing the kind of support that you're giving to those churches that really need that extra support. So thank you so much. And, you know, folks, I'm just thrilled that this is available to you. Also, his piano solos are available separately. And so we're grateful to you, Chuck, and also for making it so affordable. The kind of support that you add on is just, you know, you can't really put a price on it, but you do make it accessible. And we're really grateful for your work. I know how long it takes you to put those together. And that's, friends, why we encourage you to support Chuck in that extra time he puts in by paying the $12 for on top of what you've paid for the series if you've bought it a la carte. So thank you so much. The other thing...
Can I just mention that the music resources that you get from Worship Design Studios is really everything you need to get running.
Yes.
Additional music resources aren't necessary if
right.
you've already got all that stuff that you need. What these music resources are for those churches that don't have the time and the resource, like you just mentioned, to be able to provide these resources. Right. And this just sort of helps assist with the development of those resources that I produced for you. So
yeah, exactly. So there are the basic things that people need if they have an accompanist, if they, you know, is already in the packet, that the downloads that are part of the series downloads. So you have everything you need. It's, you know, if you don't have an accompanist and you're not paying an accompanist, you're paying Chuck $12 to become your accompanist, basically, on these on these things. So so that's exactly.
Guaranteed. There's snow or sleet or
guarantee he'll be there. That's great. That's great, Chuck. So Chuck is also available for questions, and you know, you can email Chuck or you can email us, and we'll send it on to Chuck if it's something we can't answer. So know that you have a support team to help you as we get ready to do this. All right, so Chuck, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you can think of that we haven't covered?
No, those two, that Advent worship series is called Prelude for the Christ Child.
Great.
So I'm look for that. There's a whole piano suite in there, and the meditations for Christmas hymns, which you already have listed in the resources.
That's right.
Are 12 piano solos that might work for your church as well.
Right.
So thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, you bet. All right, friends, we're almost to the end. But the last thing I want to talk about is the sermon fodder, small group, and individual study possibilities document. There's a lot in that document. It's many, many pages long. And we just uploaded the finalized one that has sermon fodder for every one of the weeks. I have an extern here, a PhD candidate from Vanderbilt University, who is working with me here at the seminary this year. She is a PhD, getting her PhD in worship and homiletics in preaching. And so I invited her to write sermon notes for this series, and she did a phenomenal job. I just, as I was reading them, I got emotional. I mean, I just so many wonderful things that you will be able to incorporate into what you're doing, but also will just spark your own study and your own sermon writing. So you have so much to help you write those sermons. I'm very excited for you. The other things you have to help you write the sermons are the books, like the Book of Joy that I was talking about at the beginning of the webinar. Immersing yourself in this topic of joy. And we list many books in there. Some are great small group study books with discussion questions, that kind of thing. So you can choose from those. There's a whole lot of children's books on joy that are really good. And so we listed many of those. So those of you in Christian education might look at those as possibilities for things that you do during a Sunday school, Christian education time. So there's so much in that document that will help you to bring the message every week. And again, the sermon fodder notes, they're completed now. So we have uploaded those to the main download place of all the so they're there. But if you've already downloaded materials, we want to make it super easy for you. So when we send out this recording link, we will also be attaching or sending you a link directly to this completed document with the sermon fodder notes in it, so that you don't have to go back to that file sharing space and find it. Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing to get that, just make it easy for you. Well, friends, there's a series trailer. The 19th download file in your downloads is a series trailer, which is a movie. A short movie that is a trailer, just like a movie trailer. So you can, at the end of it, there's some blank space where you can add your church's website, you can add your church's location or time, service times, or whatever information you want to put on there. You can use that on your website, use that whole trailer, as a movie that plays on your homepage to invite people to church. That's the way people are shopping for churches these days. And so I always make these inspirational series trailers that you can use to get the word out. Call it publicity, call it evangelism. It really doesn't matter. And also share that on social media, on your church's Facebook account or Twitter or whatever it is. So feel free to use that link. Let's make the hashtag joy to the world. And in this way, if you don't know how to use hashtags, whatever you hashtag in your social media, if you then search for hashtag joy to the world, it will bring up other churches and what they're doing. And especially if you put pictures of your joysticks or whatever it is. I mean, you might have your whole youth group might make joysticks and take a selfie, a picture of the group and post it. Whatever it is that you can bring attention to this message that we're trying to get out into the world, because it's a message that the world so desperately needs at this time. Jenna, I'm turning to you for, I tried to see some questions as we went along, but what questions do we have that I have missed before we close out this webinar?
Yeah, we had a question. This might have been better suited to Mark, but I understand Mark has said to leave the webinar. Some folks wondering about the messages that Mark has created for the children's time scripts in worship.
Okay.
Someone said, our children's sermon includes a wide range of ages from preschool up to high school, hence we call it Time for Youth. Are Mark's sermon and craft ideas geared toward just children, or could they be used for older age youth as well?
That's a great question. If you would do a favor, go to the Facebook page for this series, put that question there. We'll get Mark's opinion about it. But here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to say that what if, because it is geared, I think it's geared to a wide age range. I'd have to look at it again. But what if he has things where certain people have in the congregation get things. So you could actually give the older ones these things to do rather than people in the congregation. And that way you're including people at different age levels in different ways. So play with that. We'll also get Mark to weigh in on Facebook on that. What else do you have?
So we had another question about visuals. Would you see decorations done all at once in the beginning of Advent, or do a gradual addition of decorations each week of Advent?
That's a great question. I would probably make it grow and grow and grow every week, right? So I would start with more greenery than you usually have. But then I would, as people process things in every week, I would add to so that you get this sort of growing kind of thing. It creates anticipation. Oh, what's next week going to look like? What's next week going to look like? So yeah, it just depends on how much you can put together, but think about how it can grow and grow over the time.
And I think that's all the questions that we've had.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, we have had a lot of people on, and even more, like 4 times more people who signed up, who will watch the recording. And so I am just thrilled, friends, that you will be bringing this series to life and bringing this message to the people who come to your church and beyond. Because as we, do things like wreath-making parties, think about how people can do that and invite people who would never come to church, maybe, who just church is not for them, but maybe they would come to a wreath-making party, right? So think about how you can also reach beyond the church walls and bring this theme to life, and bring that message that says life is hard, and yet underneath it all, there is a supply of hope, love, peace, and joy. That joy is not something that's only there when you're happy and life is good, but joy is this deep-seated well that we can dip down into when the times aren't great, and we can get reassurance, we can get buoyed up, we can get a healthy dose of the support and the love of God, of each other, and that's what we're called to do in the world. So friends, thank you so much for what you're about to do in Advent, Christmas, and beyond. I give thanks to God for you. And again, please email us if you have any questions. We're here to support you. And if you know of other pastors who are wondering what to do for Advent, Christmas, they need a little help in enhancing what they do in worship, please spread the word about Worship Design Studio. We are here to serve churches of all sizes and to help you do what you do, going deeper and higher in what you do. And I am grateful for the opportunity to do that. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.